Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Mr. Bartels, you're up.
All right, good evening, everyone, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, we're going over the rate study again. This was presented to everyone back in November of 2020. And we are bringing back the rate study. We did a lot of analysis. Previously, it was submitted to everyone with a different rate structure. I know Randy had sent out an email earlier last week and explained why we're coming back with the rate study again, as far as the businesses being with the restructuring of the rates, the businesses would be affected more than the residential customers, and so we wanted to look at that. We didn't want to have businesses impacted like that, so we're bringing back this again, and this now has the residential users should not subsidize large water users, and so they will be put at a disadvantage. And so the presentation tonight will keep our tiered rates in place, and we have a host of people here from Stanley Consultants on the line who will be giving the presentation. We have Kirsten Bob with Stanley, Michael Colby, Larry Thomas, and I believe Deb Mathias is on the call as well. And I believe Larry Thomas will be giving the presentation tonight. So if anyone has any questions before we get started, I'd be happy to answer those questions, but there should be plenty of time to answer those questions once we are complete. All right, I will turn it over to Mr. Thomas then.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. So yes, we're going to go through the rate study again, as we had previously back in the winter, but with some substantial changes to the way that it's being put together. First slide, Michael, or second slide. What we're looking at is the cost of service analysis. And as he said previously, we had looked at it in terms of trying to equate the rate that everyone was paying, no matter what customer class you were in. We found that this was very disruptive to the existing system and had big impacts on some of the businesses. So the decision was made instead to retain the existing structure of the system and then to have a uniform rate of increase for everyone. When we're looking at this, each of the funds, the water, wastewater, and stormwater, all of them are intended to operate as enterprise funds and to be fully self-sufficient in terms of their revenues and their expenses. And so the job now was to match our revenues, to keep our revenues up with our anticipated expenses. Next slide, please. The billing requirements, and we have two pieces that we work with when we're putting this together. First is how much water are we selling, because that's the determinant of how we bill for both water and wastewater. It's based on how much water goes through your meter. And then our expenses are conventional operation and maintenance expenses, labor, power, chemicals, and all of your other expenses such as insurance and so forth. Another big component of is your capital financing. You've had to finance prior projects in the past, and so now we have those bonds that we have to repay, and so those become a major component of our rates that we have to charge. Next slide, please. So first off, we're looking at the water utility rates. Next one. Yes, thank you. For the billing cycles, our commercial users are billed monthly, and our residential users are billed quarterly. So there's a rate that you charge for each 100 cubic feet of water that people use, but there's also a fixed meter charge. And so for every meter, whether you use any water or not, you're paying a fixed charge, either quarterly or monthly, and that charge is based on the size of the meter. And the size of the meter is related to how much water can pass through it. So the large meters pay more, and the meters that are billed monthly pay more on an annual basis than those that pay quarterly. We also have a feature in your water rates in that after you get past a certain point, you pay less per 100 cubic feet. So it's called a declining block rate. So for your initial water usage, you pay one rate. After you pass a certain amount for large users, their rate per 100 cubic feet declines. And we're also maintaining, there is currently an elderly and handicapped discount of $12.60 per year, and that rate will be retained. So for our basic assumptions for the near future is that the number of counts and the amount of water you're going to sell are going to remain stable, that the revenues, other than water charges, are going to increase at the rate of 1% a year, but that your operating expenses are generally going to increase at a rate of 2% a year. Now, with recent changes in inflation in the country, that 2% might end up being a bit of a wild card because we don't know if it's going to be 2% or if it's going to be something higher than that. But for right now, we're going to use the 2% rate increase. And then we're also assuming that there's not going to be any new debt incurred by the utility through this 5-year period. Next slide, please. So using this assumption, this is the do nothing example. So if with existing rates, if we don't do anything, our revenues are fairly stable in the 7.5 going to 7.8 million. Expenses rise slowly from 9.2 to 10.8. But you see your water fund, because we're bringing in less revenue than our expenses, will fall from a positive 4.14 million to a negative 4.14 million. That's just a coincidence that they're just the same number. And our debt service coverage ratio, which we're obligated to maintain at 1.0 or higher, drops down to 0.9. And then next slide, please. So this gives you a visual of what's going on here. The rates, the dots, the black dots, that's your rate, stays the same. You can see your revenue is fairly stable. That's the orange line. But your expenses, which is the brown dash line, are consistently above your revenues. Slide, please. And so here's the impact on your fund balance. You start off with $4.41 million, and the red line is your fund balance. And you can see that it slowly declines until by the end of the period, you're at negative 4 million. So over the period, you've lost over it, your balance has declined $8 million if it's increased. That doesn't look good. Our proposed rate structure is to continue billing our users and on a monthly basis and our residential users quarterly, to maintain a fixed meter charge and to increase that rate at the same rate as we increase the cost per 100 cubic feet. We retain the declining rate block structure through this, but they increase that also at 5.5%, and maintain the elderly and handicapped discount. And we can get things to balance out if we increase everything at 5.5% a year. So across the period. Next, thank you. So with this one, our revenues increased from 7.5 to almost 10 million. Our expenses increased from 9 to 10, and our water balance will still fall, but the fall is less and it stays positive, and it falls from 4.1 to 1.2 million dollars, and our debt service coverage ratio increases. Next, please. You can see we're still, our revenue is the orange line, our expenses is the brown line, the brown dash line. You can see we still consistently our revenues are less than our expenses, but the deficit is less each year. And if we do this, go to the next slide, please. You can see that our fund balance, the red lines, are declining, but they stay positive, in positive territory, and they stay at a level that the staff is comfortable with ending of the period at $1.23 million. So we're spending down our fund balance, and when we're doing this, we're also able to maintain our capital program, our planned capital program. So even though we're operating at an annual deficit, our fund balance is carrying us through this period. Next slide, please. So with this 5.5% increase, we can see what the impacts are on our typical customers. The top row is your typical residential customer who uses about 524 cubic feet of water per month. And what that turns out to be then is on a quarterly basis, because they're billed quarterly, the cost is $94 currently. And if we go up at a 5.5% increase by 2025, people will be charged $123 per quarter. So you're going from basically on an annual basis, you're going from $376 to $492. So that's a $120 increase over that per year over a 5-year period. And then the other examples that are shown here are for your large residential and for your large commercial accounts. Everyone is going up at the same percentage, the 5.5% a year. It's even across the board in terms of what they're seeing. And if we take a look at the comparison of the current Rock Island rates with and proposed rates for this 2021, this first increase, and compare that to your neighbors, you can see that we're at the midpoint. There's some communities that are higher than you, and this is all for 1,000 cubic feet of water. And some of your neighbors are lower, but you're right in the right area that you should be as far as your water rates go. Does anybody have any questions on the water side?
Yes, I do. This is Alderman Dave Geenan. When you talk about the senior citizen and handicap discount, what is the age gap to qualify for that senior discount?
Michael, can you help me with that one? Staff.
Because we were told at the last census that we have an aging population here in Rock Island, that our younger population is not as increasing as our senior population. So if we continue to discount $12 per resident bill, we know we have more and more seniors coming online in the next 10 years. Is that at 65? What age do you determine seniors to qualify for that discount?
I don't know the age for the
That
discount.
would be important to know, because we know from the census we have a lot of people that will be applying for discounts in the next 10 years if we don't know.
We can find that out.
I believe it's 65.
Finance department.
65, because we've
I
got a
think
lot
so.
of people turning 65. That's a lot of residents paying water bills.
Yeah, so it's like $10 a month, right?
$12.
$12.
Michael Coolby,
times
could you tell
10
us
years.
what the total amount that adds up to? Do we have that in our spreadsheets?
I can definitely, in the spreadsheet, but I have the numbers to calculate that number in the spreadsheet. And that was $12 per year on the elderly
right.
handicap discount.
But what is the total dollar amount that we're talking about? What are we showing in the spreadsheets? Do we not have that?
Oh, you know what? I do have that. Let me pull that up.
I'm
So
not
the water
advocating
side-
that we get rid of it. I'm just wanting to make a point that we do know in the next decade we're going to have a lot more 65-year-olds. So we'll have to be discounting more per year unless we turn the trend of our population to get more young people to move in and buy houses. That's all.
Need to change it to my wife's name.
And so on this line here, you can see what it has been in the past. I'll highlight it here on this spreadsheet. So in the water account, the elderly handicap discount represents about $16,000 as an expense, quote unquote, to the water utility. So that's currently what it is about now, is about $16,000 a year.
Right, so even if it doubled, it's still not a huge impact on the system.
No,
120,000 is more than zero.
15,000.
16, well, it's still more than $0. I just, just wanted to raise the question. Thank you.
Goes to 32,000. 65?
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
I had a question.
Any other?
Yeah.
Okay.
On this subject matter, so not related to seniors or the disabled, but for our consultants or maybe for staff, I'm not sure who would be best to answer this question, but are you familiar with any like assistance programs for those who have difficulty paying their utility bills, and working with other municipalities? Have you seen things like that? And if so, what's like a common version of that? If you can't afford your utility bill, somehow you get some help with that. Have you seen anything like that?
I have seen it in other states, but I'm not aware that Illinois has a program for that at this time. What you're talking about is an assistance program similar that they have with NICOR, with the gas and with electric, where you can make contributions to that fund, and then they'll use that to help reduce rates. And also as part of the COVID program, I believe that they were doing some utility assistance in that case. But I'm not sure if Illinois has put a program like that into place.
Good question.
So we have a number of agencies
this is
that
a
help
question.
out, but the agencies, I think they all have to be repaid back. Do you know, Linda? I think they have to be repaid back when agency helps you out. So what they typically help out is the Social Security check isn't arriving for 2 weeks, and next week is when the bill is due.
Is that like Project Now's? I think isn't
Project Now and some of the others, and Finance refers them, they've got a list of a few of those.
Quad City Hub Supplemental Emergency Assistance Program is another.
Yeah, but I think that's all a payback on that. I think it's just temporary. Some of them are, I know, but
We pay into it every year at the day.
again, we provide them, anyone that's having trouble, we provide them with those numbers, but we don't do it ourselves.
And to clarify, if somebody doesn't pay their utility bill, the city shuts off the water, right?
That's correct. After a lot of notices, and if they can't pay, we're incredibly lenient on a payment plan.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on water?
This is Alderman Robinson. So I have a question on what is the benefit of the declining block? I don't know if you mentioned that.
Okay, the declining block is a rate structure that became popular in the 50s and 60s, and it was used as a means to encourage industry to come to areas so that they would have less costly water for cooling and things of that nature. In recent decades, the declining block structure has been disappearing in many utilities because of the desire to encourage conservation of water. But that's basically what it is. It's a program to allow you to sell water to the large users at a lower cost. The smaller users have to make up, you still need the same dollar amount to run the utility. So that means that the base rate has to be higher to cover the lower rate for the high volume users. We took a look at eliminating the declining block structure for your utility, and the decision was that the impact on your commercial and industrial base was too large for that to happen, that it could endanger some of these industrial concerns and maybe encourage them to go elsewhere if it was pursued. So, but that's the premise of a declining block.
Do we have a number how many that impacts?
It's a very small number of accounts. It's less than 10.
So I can understand. So the residential, smaller residential customer makes up the difference for the industry.
That's correct.
But you also have to figure out that with the tax structure, the commercial entities pay more than the residentials do. So it kind of is a balance out. In certain areas, the businesses pay more than the residents do, and the water is the one case where the residents do help pay a little bit more for the businesses.
And since there's so many more residents, the difference is pretty slight. It's not like it's a huge percentage. So I can go over specific numbers with you, but we had some customers that would see over a 50% increase in the first year. Every community in the area does the declining blocks, and we would be at a disadvantage economically trying to attract customers that used any amount of water, any significant amount of water to our area.
Well, who's one of our largest users? GTI, Green Thumb Industries?
They use quite a bit, yes.
Yeah, to grow the plant
And
takes a lot
they
of water.
put millions and millions into the community and have expanded lots of jobs, and it would have been an enormous shock. But I can sit down with you and go over specifics. We have all that number, all those data.
Okay, thank you.
And we had two aldermen that were on our finance committee. So last year, we started a finance committee where two aldermen took a deep look at the budget, line item by line item, along with me and the staff. And that was Alderwoman Swanson and Alderman Poulos. And they also looked at this issue and saw all that specific detail.
Could you remind me, beyond GTI, like a new industry within the past 5 years, who has had more of a demand on our water? Because GTI was a good expansion, but it does use more water on our system.
McLaughlin Body might.
Right.
They expanded.
So like having this,
Hill and Valley uses
Valley.
quite a bit, and
having
they've
this tier
expanded. so-
structure is new now that we probably should reconsider because we have new industries using more water now that we didn't expect when we looked at this a few years ago, right?
You wouldn't have attracted them if you wouldn't have had
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the process.
And I think the big fear is we want to keep that industry, so we don't want to do anything to cause them to leave.
Yeah, Illinois needs to expand its marijuana industry, and we want, if it requires water, we don't want to distract them from growing here, if they
And
could.
some of our high water users in the past have considered looking in other areas, so.
So Hill and Valley, GTI, other industries.
And there's others. I can get you the list of the top users.
I know
We
you
have all
told
of
me
that
I could look it up.
information.
but
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's get wastewater rates. Waste in the same fashion as the water. We're using the same meters. And your commercial users are billed monthly, and residential users are billed quarterly. Your meters, again, you have a fixed rate charge based on the size of your meter, with the larger meters paying more and the smaller meters less. And then we have the declining block rate structure also in place for the wastewater side. The elderly and handicapped discount, a little bit bigger here, it's $22.48 per year on the wastewater side. And then for your very large users, Miller Container and Rock Island Arsenal, there's actually a part rate structure that's in place for them, which takes into account not just volume, but also their BOD contribution that they make and the suspended solids that they discharge into the system. So it's an entirely separate rate for those two customers, which is intended to capture the cost of treating their wastewaters. Next slide, please. So in this case, we again are assuming that our number of accounts and our wastewater discharges will be the same over the 5-year period, that our revenues, other than our rates, will increase at 1%, our expenses will go at 2%, and that there will be no new bonds issued by the utility during this 5-year period. Next slide, please. So this gives us, under the no increase option, revenues are fairly flat, expenses rise a little bit, and our wastewater balance falls from $2.88 million to a negative $4 million. And our coverage ratio for our bonds falls below the required 1. Next slide, please. So again, our revenues in this case are the orange line, and you can see it's flat. And our expenses in this case are always above our revenue. Next slide, please. And so following the red bars, you can see that we go from a positive $2.9 million and we slide down to a negative fund balance of $4.1 million if we do not raise rates. Next slide, please. So for our proposed rate structure, we're going to continue billing everybody the same way. If you're the commercial users monthly, the residential users quarterly, we're talking about doing a fixed meter charge that will increase at the same rate as the volume rate charge, and the rates for everybody go up the same amount. We maintain the elderly and handicapped discount, and we also maintain the industrial rates for flow, BOD, and total suspended solids. Everybody going up, in this case, at 4.5% across the board. And when we do that, next slide, we see that our revenue climbs from 9.8 million to 11.8, so a $2 million increase over the period. Expenses go from 9 to 10.6, and our fund balance decreases, but it stays positive, and it stays in a range that's acceptable to the staff. And then our debt service ratio stays over 1. Next slide, please. So we can see that our revenues, the orange line, climb, and in this case, we do, by the time we get to 2023, our revenues exceed our expenses. And so we are able to start accumulating some funds. Next slide. And you can see that we go negative on the wastewater utility fund with this scenario. And then we climb out of the hole and we end up at the end of the 5-year period with a positive balance. So looking again at the impacts on our customers. On the top row, again, is your typical residential customer right now. They're paying $121 per quarter, and that will increase to $151 per quarter over the 5-year period. And then your monthly rates for your commercial accounts, you can see they go up at the same 4.5% rate. So there's no big shocks to the system here. Everybody's climbing at the same amount, and we're gathering enough money to keep the fund balances at levels that are acceptable. Next slide, please. And again, looking at our rates, the first 2 bars, versus our neighboring communities, you can see that our wastewater utility rates are higher than our neighbors. So that is the concern that we need to try and get too aggressive with those rate increases to try to stay in the pack with everybody else. Any questions on wastewater rates?
I don't know if there's the right time for the question or else, but maybe the reason, I don't know the reason why ours is so high. I know we spent over the last decade or whatever a lot of money on the waste side. Is it because of bonds, the debt we have?
That's an important factor. Michael, if you back up a couple of slides to where you see the next one. Okay. Here you can see your capital finance. This is your bond. The blue bars are your bond, are your debt payments. Okay, and red is your operating expenses. So your debt payments are as great as or higher than your operating expenses at the time. But you had improvements that were necessary in the recent past that had to get financed. And so, but at this particular time, until those bonds get paid down, you are carrying a heavy debt load at this time.
I can't read that, and I looked at it. What is our total debt on both the water and or sewer?
3 million.
The 3 million? You good?
It's in the spreadsheet. They can look it up.
Yeah.
But my number off the top of my head is like 40-some million,
Okay.
approximately.
83.
83 in the waste?
No, total.
Total,
Water and
between the
sewer.
two.
Yeah, Linda
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I just went over.
Yeah.
83?
40-some million for the waste?
83, 84.
Can you
It's
pull
more,
that up?
it's way more than that because the waste is significant. That was a long-term control plan, which was
And since all this,
$70 million or so.
and all this was done pre-COVID, so we can't
And we've
use
been
any
paying
of this
some of
extra
that
money.
off.
Then that's not included in the spreadsheet she gave me.
It is.
I was shocked at how low
Years
our
ago.
debt was.
So this is the wastewater spreadsheet, and so I have, up at the top, I have here kind of all the annual payments on the debt. So this is a list of all the the debt payments for the different bonds and IEPA loans. And so we level out at about an annual payment of about $5.1 million per year on annual payments. And then I don't have a list of the total debt of all of the loans here, but for the IEPA loans, you can see kind of a short list going through of 500,000, 20 million, 15 million, 10 million, 10 million, 3 million, 8 million for all these IEPA loans. And then there are also some bonds that aren't listed here as well, so that would be even a little bit higher. And this is just for wastewater.
We can get you those numbers, but it is the long-term control plan on the sewer side. And on the water side, we did just do the new water plant in addition to some other previous expenses, but we can get you that exact number.
These weren't the
I
bonds
asked-
that we reissued.
Well, I think you have it already. I just don't have it in front of me,
Yeah,
so I can't.
I have it, and that's why I said I was shocked that, I thought it was low. I thought it would be like twice that amount because of the long-term control plan that we spent $90 million on plus, right?
Yeah, it's a little less than that, I think,
But-
but we've been paying on that for
I
10
know.
years.
But,
Is your mic on? I can't hear you.
yeah. But, so that was one of my concerns, especially as American Water is getting ready to come to us with a number. What is our real total debt for water and sewer?
We should have it, but I'll confirm it and get you that number.
We have an estimate around 40 million.
It's more than 40 million. I think 80 million is probably correct. I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't seen the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was provided to Alderwoman Gilbert, but
Well, the 80 million, that's just for what we already done, but there's still projects that we still need to do, right?
well, the projects we need to do aren't going to be funded by debt. They're funded by the rate structure. So what I sent you today includes those projects for the next 5 years, and the proposal is they would be funded from user fees, and we would not incur debt for those.
Gotcha.
So that's why the rates are 5.5% and 4.5%. Water is higher because we have a significant number of water projects that are quite expensive. And I sent you those lists too, so you can take a look at those, and the Public Works Director and I can sit down and discuss those at any time.
And that's still gonna keep us higher than our neighbors as far as rates.
Sewer were already higher because, again, we had that long-term control plan, so we had significant increases in the 2000s, and I'm trying to think, I thought it was 40 or 50% over a few years. It was quite a lot. But our water should still be fairly competitive, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
it is.
It is.
Can you bring up the water chart for rates?
And I don't think the
compared to other-
neighboring cities have had to do the wastewater like we have. That's the difference, is that they made improvements and done some, but not to the extent that we had to. We were actually sued by the federal government to do that.
Yeah, so there we are. You can see we're on the left there and where we compare to other water rates, so
Right.
we're in the middle there and quite competitive.
Sewer.
Right.
Sewer is just expensive, again, due to that long-term control plan.
But this is with the proposed rate increase, or? with-
Well, the first column is what we have now, and the second column is the proposed increase.
Okay, okay.
Over
the first year,
Over the first year. So it would go higher, but everyone else has rate structures increasing also.
Okay.
In Iowa, they've asked for increases. If I remember right, it was 4 point something a year. I don't remember exactly.
So how is the mitigation for that PFAS and that other stuff that we're gonna have to do if lawsuit doesn't?
Something that we will have to address. It's not factored into any of these numbers because we don't know what the mandate will be and when it will come.
Okay.
Do you remember a few months ago, maybe it was before COVID, that Daryl Hurl came here about PFAS and had a study session and warned us about this?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I saw him at church on Sunday and told him, hey, he was like, well, eventually I told you guys it was gonna come. Remember when he came and told us about that?
So there are projects outside of what we're factoring now.
There's always going to be mandates coming forward from the EPA.
I'm just trying to wrap my head about figures, so.
Yeah, like I said, there's mandates that will be coming forward at all certain times. PFAS is one of them. And again, we don't know what the requirement's going to be. Jason could talk about it a little more. We just did a presentation a few months back about that very issue. And so, again, the PFAS is not factored in this. And there's other elements in the water side as well that are not factored into this that we're hoping to use the American Rescue funds to address that are not in the capital improvement program. So.
So that's just regulations that come down, there's an unfunded mandate, we never know when they're gonna come up with a new mandate. The PFAS right now, we're quite low, in most states, there would be no issues for us.
Yeah, and we're not any different than any neighboring community. Moline's dealing with the same thing, East Moline, and they all have similar PFAS levels to what Rock Island has.
Just now
Actually, we're a little bit lower than others.
It's just now there's lawsuits that we can join, class actions, isn't that what that was about?
I know there talk about them joining into a suit, that's correct.
Yep, and I've asked
What
Dave
study
for an
session's about?
update on that, so staff gave an update on what PFAS was and explained it, and then we had the lawyers that came in and wanted us to sign up.
That's what that gentleman came and warned us about was coming our way. 2 years ago.
The requirements in the future that we don't know about.
So I have another question for Mike, because you just said you're hoping to use ARP funds for some other projects.
That's correct.
What's the total?
I submitted that information to Randy, so he has that information. There's several projects. None of our water distribution side, as far as bringing the water.
Ballpark number? A ballpark number?
I mean, it varies. So we need generators for our treatment side on water. We don't have any generators at our new filtration building. Our raw water pumping station does not have generators if we lose power there to bring the water in from the river.
And none of these were part of the Johnson Control projects, these additional
That's
items?
correct. No, that was just based on savings,
Okay.
and there's no savings with generators as far as energy.
Right. So if you don't want to, if you could just email me a ballpark number, please?
Yeah, we can send that
I
out.
can send that too. So we have input from all the staff on what they are suggesting to use these ARP funds with, but again, we have no process yet identified. That's something we're going to discuss tomorrow night on how to get started on that and what council is interested in spending that money towards, or at least the process on how we're going to determine how to spend that money.
Okay. Any more questions? If not, we'll get started on the stormwater. All right. So on the stormwater utility, it's based on the size of your lot. Single-family homes are built based on either a small, medium, or large lot. And then your single-family homes and your larger parcels are built on the basis of impervious area units, which are equivalent to 2,800 square feet on the parcel. So the objective here is that everybody pays according to the amount of runoff that comes off their property. And if you do improvements that reduce the amount of runoff, then you can get a discount on that. But right now, with no changes in the revenues, the revenue is the green line. And you can see and the brown line, dashed line is our expenses, and you can see that we are, again, running a deficit relative to our expenses. Next slide, please. And so we go from a positive balance to a negative fund balance. Right now, we have about $1 million in the fund balance, and it would drop to $1.5 million in deficit. So we need to do a rate increase, and what we're proposing in this case is to increase the rates for everyone at 34 cents per year. So your present rate, per month rate, it starts at $2.96, and in 2025 would increase to $4.23. And then depending on the size of the lot and so forth, the rates are a little bit variable. But basically, this is a fairly small charge for everyone. But the cost per month is going to be increasing basically by $1 quarter over that period of time. this works out. It's a fairly high percentage increase. It runs between 11 and 8% depending on which year you're in, since it's a steady increase, but the dollar amount is small. So does anybody have any questions on this? And this gives you the rate. You can see our rates match pretty much our expenses, so that our fund account drops some, but it doesn't go negative. Any questions on stormwater? All right, let's go to the summary then, Michael. So we're recommending increases in all three utilities, 5.5% on the water, 4.5% on the stormwater, and 34 cents a month increase for the stormwater. And we don't know what's going to be happening in terms of future mandates. We don't know what's going to be happening in terms of inflation. So we recommend that you continue to make sure that your revenues and expenses are matching up as we've looked at them in this study, and make adjustments, fine-tuning adjustments as you go into the future. Any final questions?
So just, you can see every year, especially in water and stormwater, the expenses are greater than the revenue, and that's on purpose because we have such a large fund balance in those. So we're doing some projects that need to be done. So it is that is something that was planned in the CIP, is to use some of that fund balance. So we are obligated by our financial policy to have a 60-day reserve, but we probably have several months in the stormwater. But one stormwater project brings that down significantly. So that's why you see those expenses the way they are.
I have a few questions, if I may. And
Sure.
again, I don't know if our consultant or our staff would be the best person to answer, so whoever wants to answer, throw it out. I often hear complaints, I mean, everybody complains about having to pay for stuff, right? But I often hear complaints regarding the fixed meter charge. People understand that they should pay for every cubic gallon or whatever the term was of water, but then they say, hey, but if I'm not using any water, why am I paying this fixed meter charge? What impact on these monthly or quarterly rates would eliminating the monthly fixed meter charge, or not monthly, but just fixed meter charge, what impact would that have on the monthly and quarterly rates?
It'd be pretty significant. I don't have that number in front of me, but that fixed meter charge, it does pay for the administration for billing and a lot of other expenditures that are included in that fund. And so we'd have to take a look at that. I don't know that number. I don't know if, Larry, if you have a revenue cost for the fixed charge, what that brings in.
Michael, you could look that up.
Can you increase your spreadsheet size too, because you can't really read it from here?
Oh, yes. So this is on the wastewater spreadsheet. And so looking at our projected years, 2021, and moving forward, the top line here is the volume charge, the volumetric per cubic foot charge, the revenue that's generated from that charge. And then the second line, this $3.5 million increasing to $4.2 million in 2025. This is the revenue generated by the fixed meter charge. So it's a little bit more than half, just kind of eyeballing it, maybe 60-40 volume charge versus fixed meter charge. And so if this fixed meter charge were to be eliminated, you would need to increase the volume charge such that this revenue, this $3.5 million up to $4.3 million is captured in the volume charge. So, and like, I And like Mike said, we didn't run that scenario, so I don't have that number of what that rate increase would be for the volume charge. But this is how much revenue is generated by that fixed meter charge.
Right, but by eliminating the service charge, I mean, obviously, we would have to increase the volume charge, but then by eliminating the fixed charge, you know, the consumer would save that amount, and then they would pay more in, you know, so I guess I would be curious to know on a household level, what type of difference are we talking about here?
We can certainly run that number.
Well, you would basically have to raise the rates high enough that you're collecting the same amount of money from everyone. Utilities are switching to more and more using the fixed meter charges as opposed to the rate charges because of conservation. Water usage has been dropping in the United States by about 2% a year for the last 20 years. And that rate is, it's going to taper off, but the volume that the communities sell now is much less than it used to be per customer. But their costs remain the same. And so so the philosophy is that your fixed charges that you have, your fixed expenses, insurance, all those types of things that you can't do anything about no matter how much water you sell, are being put, the philosophy now is to try and put those into a fixed meter charge as opposed into a volume charge, so that you are assured of being able to cover your costs as water usage declines. So this is something you have to be very careful about, because while we have assumed that your water usage will be steady through this period, it's possible that it could decline through this period unless you get another big user of water, because your residential users are using less water every year.
Again, we could still look at that if you'd like.
Now, on that same subject, I suppose, so we have our insurance program for like lateral repairs and stuff like that. However, I have had a couple of constituents who were rejected for that because we don't know where the lateral is going or something like that, and then they get stuck with a multi-$1,000 bill to just have water in their home or not have sewage backing up in their home, and they can't afford that. You know, what is staff's recommendation to address those who are rejected from the insurance program? Could we create some sort of fund that those who are rejected to the insurance program could be able to use, and then that is, you know, then what type of impact would that have on the monthly, quarterly bills that we all pay, you know, everyone else pays?
Are you saying creating a separate fund within that enterprise fund to do?
Yeah, not a whole separate enterprise fund, but I guess what I'm saying is that we got to figure out something to do for people who are rejected for the insurance program for their laterals, because the city just doesn't know where their I mean, it's no fault of their own.
And they're still
right?
paying into the sewer program?
No.
No, they're not.
They're not paying into the insurance program, but,
Okay.
you know, it's some development that was built in 1930, and we don't have maps for it, and we don't know where the laterals go, and it's no fault of this homeowner, and now the city says, well, we're rejecting you because we have no idea what this lateral looks like, and we could get into a lot of trouble, and then they get paid.
So on that, it's not necessarily we don't know where their lateral goes. It might be some circumstance where it goes underneath a building or underneath the garage.
Right.
Or it has some, goes underneath the creek. So when we look at those, the people that are trying to get on the program,
Yeah.
usually they're rejected because of the extensive cost that it's going to be for us to come in there and utilize that program.
Right.
So it could also be the condition of the pipe.
Yeah.
Currently, we have a lot of people that abuse that program. So they get on it because they have a known problem with their sewer.
Right.
They get on it, and if our investigation or our research into that lateral isn't sufficient or isn't good enough, they get on the program, they get their problem fixed. We ended up footing the bill. They haven't paid anything into the program, and then
They hop off.
they hop out.
Yeah. No, I get that. And just as much as, I mean, if the city can't afford fixing this because it's going to be so expensive or whatever, how on earth do we expect a normal household to? right? So we got to figure out something. I mean, we can't just say, oh, well, looks like you're screwed, right? There's got to be some solution here to something, right? So that's.
Which we've done.
We can get information. There's a variety of private services. I mean, you can go on the internet and find any number of private services. They probably have some exclusions. I don't know what they are, but there's certainly, it's fairly easy to apply for and receive.
Okay. Last question, if I may. So we're talking about the CIP. We're talking about making sure that we have enough money coming in to pay for the repairs that we know we need to do for our water infrastructure. We definitely need to repair our water infrastructure. 11th Street is patched after patched after patched. How are we determining how much to budget for? Or I guess, how do we determine what projects need to be done with respect to our water infrastructure? I emailed Randy and you a month or two ago about an asset management plan of just knowing what are our assets and how much money do we need to be putting aside to make sure that we maintain them at a reasonable maintenance level. How do we make that determination?
So we track every main break that we respond to is tracked in City Works. We can pull up a heat map and show every location that we have been sent out to do the repairs, and so we prioritize those based off of that methodology. We have our engineering staff provides the detailed estimates for the cost to budget for the like 11th Street. As you said, you can drive down 11th Street and see 40 patches down the center of the road that were from repairs year after year. Each one of those repairs probably varies from $20,000 to $30,000 for repairs, so those add up quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, and honestly, a lot of our projects, due to funding, have stayed on the CIP, and so a lot of those projects have been in the works for several years. And that's why we're wanting to make sure that we have enough fund balance to implement our CIP and actually get those projects off of that list.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, but it sounds like what you're describing is still very reactive. I mean, we see where the main breaks are happening, and then we go and replace the pipes. Maybe not like a patch or something, but still replace the pipes. But that's still sort of reactive. I don't know, like lining the interior, I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but, you know, we should be doing more to preserve the infrastructure that we have, not just responding to when it's broken, fixing it. Does that make sense?
yeah,
The
no,
house is burnt down, we're putting fire hydrants on the corners of the streets.
yeah, we've done lining. We've actually done some test lining on our water mains. It didn't work out very well. We weren't, weren't very satisfied with the product. We're always looking for ways to improve, you know, sustainability on our water mains. We know the projects that need to be done, so we want to be proactive instead of reactive, but that's just the way it's been over the past few years.
Oh, I get it.
How many years?
I get it.
I'm sorry?
How many years? You said over the past few years.
For the
Decades?
past 5 years, approximately. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've done some projects, but again,
38th Street,
we've
my ward's been great, 14th Avenue, you know,
yeah.
state money.
And we do line sewers.
Yeah,
So
we-
that's a
we do.
program that's successful for us.
And those are maintenance programs. They're factored in the CIP. We have a catch basin program under stormwater, sewer lining for our sanitary sewer. So we do have some preventive maintenance, but those, again, haven't been funded every year to year.
I guess that's sort of, I mean, that's, like you say, that's the point of having a rate study, is making sure that we are appropriately considering what we got to pay for, and then how we're going to get that money, and so,
And you talk about 11th Street water main, that alone was $1.8 million just to replace that main
1.8 million for one water main?
for the water main installation. And
Now, Mike, that's from 31st to 46, right?
That's correct.
That area that you're talking. So, quick question to feed off of that. Do we have and maybe we've already received this a while back, and I just may have forgot about it, sorry. Do we have a list of maybe our top failing areas in the city? Do we have some, and what's the process for you to prioritize and make up this list on what needs to be done first, the most pressing issues? I mean,
And that-
if we're talking about being more proactive than reactive,
Where's the heat?
that is our CIP.
right? I'm
So-
just saying, do we have a list of the top ones though, and costs associated with each one?
Yeah, that's
too?
our 5-year CIP.
Right.
And so we put those projects on year to year, and every year we put another list of
Right.
projects on. And
So-
we do that work from there. And then every year during budget season, we get together with the water and sewer sides, see which priority they would like to add to the CIP, and that's how we determine that. And there's a whole host of evaluations that we get to add those projects to the list.
Okay, so again, I remember seeing that, but was there associated costs that were listed with each of those projects?
There is.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back and look at it. Thank you.
And maybe that's something Larry might be able to go back to that one screen. I think they built into this rate plan here, okay, here's how much we're gonna try to spend with CIP in the past. You know, with cuts, we haven't been able to. So those CIP projects, they seem like they're on the list forever, because they are. They just keep rolling them until maybe, you know, we'll have enough money next year, so put it over.
Yeah, there is an Excel sheet that was sent out, the Public Works proposed CIP 2021 to 25. I mean, we have that all in front of us.
That's the list,
Yeah, you
yes.
sent it to us. It divides it up by streets, street maintenance, water, sanitary, and storm.
stormwater.
So yeah, it's Randy, it's on your drive, it's on the Google Drive.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is we've had a backlog of 5 years' worth of water infrastructure projects that we haven't been funding because of budgetary limitations. This is good, in my opinion, that we're actually saying, okay, we need to fund these things so that we can fix the water infrastructure. But what about the 5 years' worth of water infrastructure projects that's not even on the docket because we're still messing around with the stuff that used to be 5 years, that should have been done 5 years ago. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to play catch-up to just then again find ourselves
Where we are.
behind.
Yeah.
So part of that issue is and I get what you're saying, we have 5 years, you want to see the other 5 years.
Right.
We're playing catch-up. That is mainly because of the EPA mandates for the water building.
Yeah.
There's $20 million there. We're talking $80 million in sewer debt that we've had, that these residential, distribution projects have suffered because of that. That's
Okay.
all of our money's going to
I guess
pay
I
for
don't
that.
really, this is fine with me so long as you're telling me that what is being proposed here in this rate, the revenue that these rates will bring in will be enough to catch us up on our water infrastructure needs and, maintain for another, whatever the expected years are.
Band-Aid, yeah.
Larry's saying no on the call, but
saying no?
it is paying for our current capital plan that we have in place.
Which
It
is
fully
only-
funds that.
Right, which is what we should have done 5 years ago.
So just to be clear, for almost 20 years I've been associated with Public Works.
Right,
We've always had more projects than we can fund.
correct.
Drive down the streets, we can't fund every street.
Correct.
Well, our underground infrastructure is the same. It's just not, we just don't have the money. And this is throughout the country.
But it's 20 years later, Randy, and it's a lot worse than it was too. Things are deteriorating a lot quicker.
Oh, I don't know about, we've made significant improvements, so I don't know if that's
Okay.
the case. I don't know.
I don't either.
I can tell you that, we do have projects, a long list of projects. I know, 5 years ago to fix every street at that time, just to bring them up to the good category was $200 million.
Okay.
So I would say, if you're looking at our total infrastructure, you would be pushing close to $1 billion probably.
No doubt.
So there's just you'll never get to the point where you can replace every single project you want to do. It's just not possible. But we're moving in that direction where we're going to get better.
And if it's not associated with a street project and we're not having issues with that main, we typically don't want to go in there and replace it just to replace it.
I know.
Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
We'll
you.
get some information back to council, and then I would like to get some feedback from each of you on what you think. As I mentioned in my email, this rate is scheduled to go into effect. The calculations are for August 1st, so it's not something we're going to vote on the 14th. But we need to make sure council's informed of everything, and if you have any questions, we've been able to address that for you before it comes back for a vote.
You need an answer from us, yea or nay, before when? When would you like to?
Oh, there's going to be July 1st of July, the next 6 weeks or so. But I'll be in contact with you and provide more information.
So quick question, do we have the anticipated date for the American Water presentation?
No, they expected to come back in June, is what they told us.
I just didn't know whether we had a set date on it.
We don't have a set date. I mean, June could be the end of June. I don't know. I talk to them every month and they give me, but they have not given me an exact date other than they hope to be back in June.
Well, that's the last I heard. I just didn't know if there's been any change.
And there's
in
two
it.
presentations. One is talking with aldermen and the other is something in public to council,
Yeah,
right?
we talked to them on Friday, and they said early to mid-June at the latest.
Yeah, so late June or July before they would have a public presentation, I would think.
I think they were thinking maybe even later for that.
Yeah, so,
Mid to early June or early mid for talking to council.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will start the city council at 6:45.